Welcome to Morning Blend. I'm Rohan Siddhanti.
And I'm Vyomika Jam. On today's show, we've got Shilpa Shetty getting involved in New York City politics, Indian DJs on the rise, and healthcare reform.
We're going to start today with a study done by the Swiss bank UBS, which studied salaries around the world. Indians, who are known for their hard work, aren't really getting paid for it if you look at their wages. They're earning 20 times less than their counterparts in major cities in the United States, Western Europe, and Switzerland.
You know, that's interesting, but I can't help but raise the fact that India's GDP, and not to mention the cost of living, just not on the same level.
On another note, India is getting paid, meaning major cities, Bombay and Delhi, $1.4 per hour. Just listen to that statistic, $1.4 per hour. Pretty pathetic, actually.
It's low, definitely. But IMF and World Bank put the cost of living, or the poverty line cost of living, at somewhere around $1.25, I think. And
right, per day.
Per day, and Indians at the current rate, working 8 hours a day, are at $11.
Right.
So we're still ahead of the poverty line.
Right, but people in the United States are making sort of $15 an hour as their average, and the UK is $14. Parts of Switzerland, $22 an hour.
But at the same time, like I said, cost of living. I mean, what goes into buying groceries, paying for gas, all of that stuff is probably significantly different to what you would be spending on those same necessities of life here in the U.S.
True, and that's on one side of the argument. In the complete contrast
is the fact that in another study done, Indian CEOs were asked to rate their level of satisfaction with their jobs and what they're doing, and at a staggering 50%, Indian CEOs appreciated their current status in life, as opposed to just 37% of American CEOs.
Right, and I remember looking at that article, and I remember seeing that a lot of the data showed that American employees trust their bosses less, so Indian employees trust their bosses more. Also,
difference to authority, respect.
Correct, and more Indian employees want to become CEOs versus less American employees want to become CEOs, as the data shows. And
it's the element of diligence. When they join, they're looking to grow, succeed, and all that is part of the growth, as opposed to maybe, you know, if an American CEO is wondering, well, what am I going to do next? What's in it next for me?
Right.
But it is interesting to note that even if they're not getting paid as much, they're happier.
That's the thing I was going to talk about. I think it's a cultural thing as well as an employment workforce idea. I think in India, this is at least from what I know, obviously not having lived there for more than 4 or 5 months at a time, I can say that I'm not 100% sure about this, but from my gut feeling shows me the Indian employment and the workforce mentality is less of a rat race than it is in America. You know?
Yeah.
I really get that feeling that India is just like, you know, you are where you are, and that's where you're going to be, and if you want to climb the ranks, you can, but there are so many millions of people and billions of people in the workforce.
Population of 1 billion there. Yeah. They're just happy to have a job, and I think that's something that we might be seeing here as the economy gets worse, and there are more and more educated, employable people in the workforce. More and more people might just be happy to have a job here.
You wanted to talk about your favorite actress as our next topic.
Shilpa Shetty, recently in New York City for a India Day parade, in which she appeared on stage with Mayor Michael Bloomberg.
Right. And a little bit of background on Michael Bloomberg. 8th richest American. He runs the Bloomberg Financial Services.
Loaded.
Exactly. Completely.
Was for the finance's own run for the presidential election.
Exactly. Correct. And so we all know him. He's actually was a lifelong Democrat, interestingly.
Mm-hmm.
Switched to the Republican Party in 2001.
Now running as an independent.
Exactly. He's trying to campaign for the nomination for the Independent Party or the Republican Party. And I think this is a great ploy by him to capture the Indian vote.
Let's discuss the fact that Ms. Shetty isn't even a citizen of the city of New York, couldn't even vote in this election.
Does she even have dual citizenship in the United States?
I don't even know if she's like endorsing this guy. I think they just got on stage together and everyone's going, she's campaigning for him.
I think so too. But if you look at it from a numbers perspective, right now, he's up by about 10 points, okay? So as of the show, when we're taping right now, he's up by 10 points. Every point in a race in New York City translates to about 12,000 to 13,000 votes. There are 2.8 million Indians in the United States, a quarter of them which live in the greater New York City metropolitan area. That's 700,000 Indians. Not all of them are going to vote, but let's say he even gets 5% of them. Okay? That's 3 percentage points that he gets up in the polls.
It could pay out for him, but I'm just saying I think it's like pandering for the vote at this point. I want to know if he's seen her movies. I want to know if he knows who she is.
But the fact that he's reaching out to the Indian community and taking the Bollywood starlet in his hand.
Bollywood starlet in his hand. Exactly.
That's like, no one else is doing it, and that's why it matters. He's getting every vote he can because he knows that's what he's going to need to stomp on the competition.
Well, she's my favorite, so I'm not going to complain too much. Hey, moving on to something else. Healthcare reform has been in the news a lot recently, and for many people our age, I think they're going, hey, I'm 18, 19, 20, and what do I care about healthcare? My parents are there to take care of it. Well, I can tell you, I'm 21, and I am worried about healthcare reform, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm nearing that age, too. Yeah. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
In a year from now, when I graduate from college, I would no longer, unless I continue on to grad school, I will no longer be covered by my parents' health care.
Right.
And this is a situation in which...
You switch from becoming a dependent to independent,
dependent status to no longer being a full-time student. And I think this is a point at which I suddenly had to realize and go, oh, wait a minute, this is serious, and this is now going to affect me personally. The New York Times did an article earlier in the year in which they talked about how many recent graduates are among the highest uninsured population in our nation. They are a group that is rather choosing to spend that extra money on rent as opposed to going out and getting their own health insurance. And this is a serious problem.
Exactly. And so unless you've been living under a rock for the last 3 months or so, you know that healthcare reform is just all over the news. There are wild accusations and rumors flowing from both sides, and we just want to clear up for sort of a younger audience. The central point of sort of what's going on is the president's plan, which is a general government public option. Now, several bills are floating through Congress as we speak that have that, as well as that don't have that, that have nonprofits funding healthcare and organizing healthcare. The reason why you're hearing the word socialism being thrown around so much in the media and on the blogs,
that's a loaded word.
Exactly, is because it is a government-run health program like, you know, Social Security or Medicare.
Right. It's a centralized program in which the state takes on the costs for those who would not opt for private insurance. In many situations, the private sector, which would pick up the difference, is saying, hey, listen, we can't afford to insure you to the same extent. People like you and I, who were, for the longest time, considered dependents, are being categorized into what can actually be counted towards a dependent. Is it going to cut off at 18? And also, on top of that, companies themselves are scaling back on the healthcare benefits that they're providing.
Employers
they're saying,
especially.
They're saying, hey, we can't necessarily guarantee those benefits anymore because it costs us a lot in taxes and in our
And that's why people are worried, because they think that if there's a government-run public option, employers are just going to drop that option and take up the public option because that's cheaper. So their employees will get worse
cheaper
healthcare.
And potentially could lower the level and quality of healthcare that the average citizen receives.
Right. So what's going on right now is Congress is in recess, and everyone's in their home states doing town halls.
I think it's a good thing that we're engaging in a conversation.